So let's get started. Looks like it's noon here, Mountain Standard, so we'll just go ahead and get going. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Build It or Buy It, the Future of Technology and Accounting. My name is Dino, and I am the Product Marketing Manager at SureLink. I'll be presenting today with Jeremy Smith, our CTO, who I will introduce formally in a few moments. But we're looking forward to diving in and sharing our thoughts with all of you on the subject. But before we do that, let's just go over a few quick housekeeping items. So please use the Q&A option within Zoom to put in your questions or comments. We'll do our best to leave 5 to 10 minutes at the end to address those. So go ahead and drop those in throughout the webinar. And then also we'll be recording this and sending it out after. So if you want to take notes, great. If not, you'll get this recording anyway. But with that said, let's jump in. So here's a quick view of the agenda and items we'll be covering today. By the time we're done, you should hopefully have a couple key takeaways. Number one, the right questions to ask yourself as you go through this decision-making process. And two, a blueprint for the next steps. Now, as I mentioned briefly at the beginning, my name is Dino, and I'm part of the marketing team here at SureLink, but I've been with the company for a number of years and have been on the sales and success side of the business, which has given me an opportunity to speak with many clients and prospects about topics like the one we're covering today. So I'm super excited to dive into this. And joining me is Jeremy Smith, as I mentioned, our CTO, who has over 20 years of experience in the field, and we'll also be sharing some great information with you today. So Jeremy, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, happy to be here. This is a great topic, and looking forward to the opportunity to talk a little bit more about some of the scars that I've gotten over the years in making these kinds of decisions, and opening up the conversation for everybody.
Awesome. Hopefully not too much PTSD, but we'll get through it. So let's start by looking at a quote from Mark Stout with Boomer Consulting. And basically what he says, it's not surprising that firms consider building a custom solution to address many of the unique needs accounting firms have, right? There's a lot going on. It takes a lot, especially, to be a large enterprise type accounting firm. And oftentimes it makes sense to want to create something unique and custom built for yourself. But why are we here today? So basically, we've been working with Boomer Consulting to research this topic, and they provided the following case study. So years ago, a top 100 firm wanted to replace their existing document management system. After evaluating the available options on the market, firm leaders decided none of the off-the-shelf solutions quite fit their needs. So why not build their own? Well, the firm invested over $1 million into building an internal document management system. And for the first few years, the investment paid off because it was custom built to their exact specifications. But as the years went on, the firm grew, needs changed, technology changed, and client needs evolved as well. So as a result, the homegrown solution became a mess, right? Firm and IT leaders eventually determined that they would need to invest an additional $1 million to update the system to fit today's needs. Not to mention the resources to service it, support clients, continue to maintain and update as years go on. So one of the things we often see with firms is they think they're in too deep when building their own solution. They've poured time, money into it, often fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy, hence the nice little image you see on the screen there. And it's basically the phenomenon whereby a person is reluctant to abandon a strategy or a course of action because they've invested heavily in it. So even when it's clear that abandoning would probably be more beneficial. So this is just one example of the challenges firms face when deciding to build or buy. We see it from top 100 firms to 20-person teams. Firms regularly struggle with the decision. And traditionally, firms built solutions because vendors were not addressing niche parts of their process. But that's changed, with cloud, APIs, native integrations. They're more affordable now, and it's a lot easier way to get into it without the big upfront and ongoing investment. And with that said, Jeremy, do you want to walk us through the crucial considerations in the build versus buy decision process? Because I think this is really where the meat and bones of this are.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we kick off this conversation and get started, we're going to talk about some of the lessons learned that I've had or experienced in sort of, in the trenches over the years, and hopefully will be useful in your decisions, build buy decisions, and any strategic technology decisions moving forward. We'll cover some of the 6 of the crucial areas, and talk about a framework to help sort of drive to good decisions. But before we really dive in, I want to share with you some of the most important questions that I tend to ask actually a lot when making these, not only when making these kinds of decisions, but in general when it comes to technology. And it's really all about context setting. It doesn't have much to do with technology at all. It's like, what is the problem that we need to solve, or that we're trying to solve, and why are we trying to solve it? Setting that context will actually build a better opportunity for you to make a good decision for whether it's a build or a buy, or an integrate, or whatever your decision ends up being in the long run. Understanding the context of that decision is going to help that process immensely. As a technologist, I get super excited about new tools and new technologies, and love all the buzz around some of the new options that are available for people. But during this process, you need to make sure that the can we do something doesn't overwhelm the should we do something. So once you've decided that you've got a business need that you need to address and you're ready to go, there are some really key conversations and questions that you need to have in order to make a good decision on whether it's a build or whether it's a buy. And I think that once you can articulate that strong sort of need and why you're doing it, it makes the rest of the conversations much easier. So let's dive in, and we can start with expertise. And the way that I view expertise is it really sort of breaks down into 2 areas. It's not only your internal talent or the resources that you have available, but it's also the systems that your firm users or your company users are currently familiar with and expert in, the processes that they've developed over time. So evaluating sort of the expertise that you have internally and identifying the strengths that you have, and really the secret sauce of what you're doing, what might be unique to you as a company, what might be more best practice as an industry, is really key in sort of understanding the ground you have to work with, so to speak, and when you go to solve this problem that you've identified. The key here to me, from a question standpoint, is understanding, what are we experts at, and then determining where our gaps are. So, it could be you could have a small IT organization that's very adept at solving problems, maybe at a departmental level, or you may have, expertise with a certain technology or stack. There are going to be gaps in every organization, and that's going to be unique to you, and really every situation. But understanding them is the real key. Now, you can overcome gaps in a lot of different ways. You can do that through education of your existing staff. You can do it through additional hiring or expanding your resources through contracting or consulting, or you can leverage vendors in the space, SaaS solutions, commercial products, open source products, in order to leverage the years that people have put into solving the particular problem that you happen to be looking at the time.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And the only thing I'd add when it comes to expertise is, it's not your client's job to innovate and look ahead at what they need. So do you have the infrastructure and people in place, like you said, to stay ahead and continue to innovate, right? Now, looking at that next piece, which is obviously also important, is cost.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this kind of comes from the notion of to play on your comments is the notion of innovation and synthesizing that information together in a way that makes sense, right? That solves the business problem that you're having. A lot of people know, I know that I've done this in the past as well, and this is one of the areas that I've been burned, is I want to jump to the cost conversation right out of the gate. Like, what's it going to cost me to build it? What's it going to cost me? What are the various buy options that I have available?
Mhm.
What are those going to cost me over time? But I think that it's really tough to understand cost until you go through some of these other areas that we're going to be talking about today. So if your existing team doesn't have the expertise, for example, you're going to not only incur costs, to train or to bring people on board, but in maintenance and custom development over time. So we've got the figures up on the screen here, but it's an investment at the end of the day to cost to move forward an internal built solution. It can be very expensive. That's the reason, that's why you can, one of the interesting options is potentially to leverage, a third party to bring in that expertise and defray that cost.
Yeah, really good point. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I jumped ahead there for a second, but yeah, the only thing I would say is, you can't be everything to everyone, right? So can you really dedicate the resources to be a strong software company and accounting firm? Yeah, I look at it like basically inserting a company like ours inside an accounting firm and what that really takes, and so I know in the next slide, we'll cover some of the examples of that, but I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, exactly. So you kind of hit the nail on the head, and the next slide there sort of talks about it. Is as you look at implementing these things, a lot of times we get caught up in the initial implementation costs or even some of the initial rollout costs, but we forget to take into account the cost that you're going to need over time, whether that's ongoing maintenance or more additional feature development, migrations in the future, or migrations in or migrations out of particular technology stacks or solutions. But the one area that I think that people underestimate the most, and that has often been one of the more motivating issues when it comes to cost for me, is what is my team capacity, sort of playing back into our expertise conversation, and what kind of time to market or time to resolution concerns are we operating against? Because what you're losing there is cost around its opportunity cost. Like what are your teams going to be solving, focused on and potentially not addressing, or what time does it take? How long does it take to get you up and running successfully with any particular solution, whether it's a build or a buy? And that can often weigh very heavily in a decision cycle. So timing and its relationship to cost is super important.
Yeah, and I would say that some of these we definitely underestimate, and I may be a little bit biased, but training, implementation, maintenance, and support take up a lot of time, especially if you want to get it right. A lot of people can kind of just put in some quick fixes there, but if you really want to provide a differentiated experience, those are things you have to invest heavily in. Now let's jump forward and look at another key component, which is security.
Yeah, I think that we all understand the sort of gravity of this topic, in our industry in particular. There are people who have entire practices focused around, security and compliance, and making sure that people have proper emphasis and focus on security. It can be a super costly, mistake if something happens to you. Or something happens to one of your vendors. So it's something that you definitely need to pay attention to. And as accounting firms, and in the financial industry in general, you're dealing with a lot of sensitive information, and it may not be personal information, but it is sensitive information, and it's really a gold mine. So it's going to be targeted over time. So simple username password breaches are one thing at organization X or organization Y, but gaining access to this information is pretty critical, just in general. So we need to be sensitive to that from a compliance or from an implementation standpoint. And really one of the key questions here is, can we as a firm or as an organization, how are we going to manage, not can we, but how are we going to manage that security, not only now, but over time? Are we going to be SOC compliant? Are we going to be CCPA compliant? Does GDPR come into play? As you grow, potentially multinationally, are there local laws or data sovereignty laws that you're going to need to deal with in your solution? So security and compliance in general needs to be a part of the decision-making process, just because you need to, not only do you need to do right by your clients in order to make that decision, but you also need to make sure that, that you're protecting the organization in general.
Yeah, and as a follow-up to that, how much time do you tend to dedicate in order to stay on top of these current security trends? Because it seems like on a monthly basis, if not more, there are new vulnerabilities or data breaches that we hear about. So whether it's a single dedicated person or as a team, how do you handle that ongoing process?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really is an investment over time. So not only training internal staff around best practices from avoiding social engineering and other threat vectors from that standpoint, but staying on top of all of the CVEs that come out on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, just securing your own systems, having a nice layered security strategy in order to make sure that you're protecting the most sensitive parts of the most sensitive assets that you have as a part of your organization. It's an investment. You have to plan for it, and you have to consistently do it over time. Or you need to find ways in order to share that investment, or potentially party with folks that can, or partner with folks that can help you manage that.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, and I think this next piece kind of flows nicely into that as well, which is the control necessary during this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is often, so usually there's a strong control argument for a build decision. We need to be able to control the rollout, or we need to be able to control the look and feel, or the experience, or we need to be able to control the roadmap moving forward. So determining the level of control that you need in solving the problem that you're trying to solve is really key. I think that really the key question for me is often, is this a mission critical system or component or process or technology that I'm trying to introduce? Is it going to require our hands-on involvement over the long term? Because those kind of conversations can get you to a really concrete understanding of how much control that you have, or how much control you're going to need over the process. Really, control and evolution, which is the next topic that we're going to hit, are really tightly related, because it often comes in relationship to roadmaps and understanding, what down the road are you going to need from a control standpoint in order to get things going, as far as making a good decision around the technology that you're going to be supporting. I think in general, from my experience, 80% of the value that you can use the sort of 80-20 rule as a technologist as well. Really, 80% of the value that we're delivering to our firms and to the clients that we serve in general is going to be done with 20% of the systems or the solutions that we have out and operating. And so we want to invest heavily in those, and we want to make sure that we make a good decision, whether that's a build or whether that's a buy. In general, you want to focus in on what's most important and mission critical from a control standpoint, which kind of leads us to the notion of evolution. How is that going to play out over time? So what are the plan? How are we going to manage evolution in both the needs of the client base and the technologies that and best practices that are involved with the solution that we choose? Whether that's a build or a buy decision, it can, the investment of time and effort to manage over time is going to be a key factor in my mind in making a good build or buy decision. Sometimes solution providers, you can offload some of that to vendors and solution providers. Sometimes you need to manage that internally. It's dependent on the technology that you're trying to solve. But understanding the control you need, understanding the evolution that you're looking for moving forward, is pretty key. Like, is this thing going to need to scale from a small number of users to a large number of users? How would I manage that? What are the best ways to do that over time?
Yeah, it's a great explanation of that. And I would, say it kind of goes back to the security piece too, right? It's a full-time job staying on top of trends and best practices. Having people internally that focus on this can make a big difference, obviously, in not just the decision-making process, but on from there. With that said, let's look at a couple of other things that I think are pretty key, which is the employee experience, and then we'll touch on client here as well in a moment.
Yeah, sort of this last area of consideration that I've found super useful over time is, and sometimes it gets overlooked, is the experience in general. Whether that's the internal user base or the client, potentially, external user base for any of the clients that your technology or solution interacts with. The overall experience is absolutely critical, because at the end of the day, we're trying to solve a business need or a business problem, or exploit a business opportunity, right, with a set of technologies or tools. And if that's causing friction in the process, that's where we need to evaluate, reevaluate, and adjust. So one of the things that I look for specifically in employee experience is, where are employees sort of breaking out of the norm or the process or the new tool, and sort of doing some work on the side and having to bring it back in. So those are sort of those friction points that you're looking for as far as key indicators to make sure that the employee experience, making sure that they're expert at what they're expert at, is critical, because you don't want them having to bounce around between a bunch of different technologies in order to answer the same problems.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think from the sales side, when I used to speak with people, I think it's important when you have employee input, especially those that are going to be in it every day, right, as opposed to just the people that are making maybe the purchasing or the build decision, because I think that will make a big difference in terms of how it's implemented, how well it's received. So I think, yeah, the employee experience is definitely a key part of that. Now let's shift to kind of the flip side of that coin, which is the customer experience.
Yeah, obviously, as whether the technology or the tools that you're developing or that you're rolling out are touching internal employees or customers is a big knowledge point as far as understanding the type of solution that you'll need. But I think that in the long run, investing in customer experience is absolutely crucial. Now, obviously, as in this industry, it's a lot of one-to-one or one-on-one relationships, and understanding the context in which things are being operated in, so that you can provide the best service and value to the clients as possible. But I think that when clients are interacting with us, it's just as important that the tools not get in their way as well, so that the experience that they have is with the company is reinforced by the tooling that we offer to them. So I think that their overall experience and ability to come back and refer and for us to retain business in the long run is in large part around the experience that they have with us, and we want to make sure that the tools don't distract from that.
Yeah, and I would say from my standpoint too, being on the success side and sales, so whether it's employee or client experience, the number one thing or fear that kind of holds people back is always the adoption fears. So the primary concern across the board is, will my clients and team members take to it? You'll take all this time to build, and ultimately won't, your team members won't really like it, or your clients won't take to it. So some questions to ask yourself is, do you want to take the time to train team members and clients and offer continuous support, kind of like we've mentioned? How much of the process, do you feel comfortable taking on internally? And do you want to address things like system bugs, features, support tickets? These are all things that'll impact customer experience. There are things you tend to not be able to just to sit on for a while, right? You have to be quick and adapt to it. So I think, consistency is key in this area for both the employees and the clients. Offering a consistent experience will allow people to adopt it and embrace it a little bit quicker. So I just a couple of other like pitfalls that I've seen is that, for clients, when departments don't talk to each other and they request the same stuff over and over again, that becomes frustrated and it looks disjointed. Or as you pointed out, Jeremy, a few moments ago, right, when people kind of take it on their own to use different approaches. You may have systems in place, but I know I've worked with plenty of people. They'll say, hey, we have this thing, but half my employees still use their email or Excel sheets or whatever it might be. So again, if you want to get this overall process right, you really have to have clients and employees on board.
For sure. And I think that really leads us, sort of to the next steps in the cycle, which is, as we gather all of this information, as we're having these conversations and we're talking with employees in the user base or the customer base, or getting feedback during the process, it's super important that we have a frame that I found to have a framework to be able to have those conversations, just in general. So, putting together that sort of a blueprint or a next step or where you can contextualize some of these conversations and driving to really good decisions and rollouts is key.
Awesome. Should we take a look at the first step?
Yeah, absolutely. So
awesome.
Creating a technology steering committee. And I don't think people should be necessarily put off by the term committee in general, because I think that this principle sort of can scale up and down depending on, the size of your organization. I think that a lot of times some of these initiatives, especially when it comes to tooling, get automatically categorized in really in any industry, but in ours, it can be as well. They get categorized as IT projects or, specifically, in one area. But I think that it's really important to have sort of a cross-functional team to help you in this process. Not only, number one, in defining the problem itself. So what problem are we trying to solve and why are we trying to solve it? But in having the conversations around, those critical or crucial areas, and then helping you vet and roll out the solution. Having that buy-in in general is really a huge win. And like I said, I think that can scale from small organizations to large organizations. Having been in both throughout my career, whether it's just sort of the head of IT and a business rep sort of coming together and working together on the project in order to make a really good decision and making it as cross-functional as you can, or whether it's a more formal or standing technology committee where you've got leadership involved in the decision-making cycle as well. I think it's also super important to get user bases involved in those conversations early and often to gather that feedback, both during the decision cycle for build and buy decisions, but also in the execution phase when you're actually rolling it out.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would say, with committees, what's nice is sometimes if you have to reroute midway through, we all know how it goes if somebody feels like the entire project is on them and you might have to pivot at a certain point through the process. They may not want to let it go, or it's just harder to kind of make that decision when it's just on one person. So I think committees kind of help overall lessen that load. You can make changes, iterate a little bit easier. So I think from that standpoint, it even helps the adoption side of things. So it's more of a team effort. Now, in the next step, we talk about making a list of requirements.
Yeah, and this kind of flows naturally out of having that starting those conversations with a committee or with partners, in the project in general. So it's really all about answering some of those key questions that we talked about up front. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Why are you trying to solve it? And then taking the next step past that is, how are you going to know when you succeeded at it? Making sure that you've got some understanding of what success looks like at the end of the day is super important, as early in the project as you can get it. Now you're going to be gathering requirements about features or functions potentially as well. But I think it's important to understand and really gather requirements around the business processes that you're trying to, accelerate, accentuate, or expand in general with the the solution that you're proposing, with whatever solution you end up choosing at the end of the day. And then, like I said, understanding how you're going to measure success and how you're going to roll it out over time. So adding those into your requirements gathering sort of phase is very key, so that you can then use that as for some of those crucial conversations that we're going to have further on in the process.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think the committee will help with this too, right? If you have different stakeholders, the list of requirements may differ, so you'll get a little bit more of a holistic view with that. Now, the third step, and sorry, I don't know if you want to jump in there.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, take stock of what you already have.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about expertise, but it's really important to understand, as you're gaining understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve, it's important to understand where you are and have a clear-eyed view about that. There can be, as a technologist, I get super excited, like I said, about building things or, integrating new tools or playing with new technology. But you need to really be able to take a step back and sort of see where you're at. Where are your strengths? What kind of resources can you bring to bear on solving this particular problem or this particular issue that you're looking to have, but having a really clear-eyed view of, sort of what's available to you from a tool standpoint internally, from an expertise standpoint internally, in order to solve that problem is key, because what you're going to do is that's where you determine sort of the gap between where you're at and where you want to be. And filling that gap, whether that is filled with a build decision or whether that's filled with a buy decision, that's, understanding sort of the boundaries that you need to work within and the metrics that you're going to use in order to determine success can all be done as you're taking stock.
For sure. And yeah, the only thing I'd add there is that, keeping clients and especially, well, employees as well, but especially clients involved during that process, I think is important to see what's going well for them, where they're getting frustrated, because that might lead to, some more insights. Now we'll jump to the fourth one, which is the evaluate potential solution providers.
So yeah, again, sort of flows naturally, like you were talking about, Dino, is that, as you gather this information and gather this feedback, around your environment, you can also take stock of potential solutions. You may have parts of this already developed or rolling in your environment that you can repurpose here, or there may be a variety of vendors that play in the space that you want to evaluate from a build buy or from a buy scenario that may provide all or part of the capability that you're looking to add in order to solve the business need. I think that whether you've got a build option on the table and you're comparing that to some buy options, or you've got a variety of buy options, you can use those crucial questions and considerations that we talked about earlier. This is really where the meat of the sort of evaluation process comes to fruition, is during this phase of the process. Use those questions to help to help drive good decisions and good conversations. And in the end, it'll sort of lead you to hopefully the best decision for your company, in the given situation.
Yeah, and I would just say resources that I've used when it comes to this that might be beneficial. Some may have already heard of them, but Capterra and G2 are a great way to kind of compare side by side solutions that you might be looking at. But also, asking firms in your area what they're using, sharing best practices, things like that. And I know we'll touch on that a little bit more, but let's go to number 5, which is aligning the process with the technology.
Yeah, so this is a pretty key part to successful rollout in general, right? So, and kind of harkens back to taking stock of the things that are already in place, whether those are tools or processes that you're already using to try to solve this problem that may be ineffective. As you either build or buy a solution and go to bring that to bear on the situation, you're going to need to align processes internally in order to take best advantage of that. And that may mean, literally just changing the way that people sort of approach or do the work themselves and helping them train up in order to get that done. Or it may be adjusting existing systems in order to take advantage of new capabilities that are now available in the environment. So that alignment happens not only at the organizational level, with the people that you're rolling out to, whether those be internal people or clients, but also at the technology level, making sure that you've got the capability to utilize or integrate with the systems and that you're bringing online. Again, build or buy.
Yeah, right. So the tools won't necessarily fix a broken process. You kind of need to think about that in relation to what you're going to implement. So I think that's a really important thing to note as well. Now, this is obviously a big piece of it, right? Ultimately, after you've done all this, rolling it out.
Yeah. So as you align processes and people around a solution, obviously that is going to play heavily into your rollout strategy as well. That could involve training. That could involve, just getting everything up and running. I'm a big believer in iterative rollouts. So, if you can start small and go bigger and gain feedback and experience along the way, that's by far been the most successful way that I've seen, initiatives like this roll out. It could be, just small populations of people or limited feature sets or, whatever is going to work for you from an iteration standpoint over time. But, start small and let it grow bigger over time. It allows the adoption cycle internally to gain momentum as you get more and more sort of champions on your side, as you roll out the new processes across the way. But it also allows you to understand and use the feedback that you're getting in order to make any adjustments that you need along the way. I've also seen this, just to harken back to, like, Dino, a conversation that we had earlier, is if things are really going sideways with something and it's just not working, it's not working the way that you expected, during the evaluation period. This is an iterative rollout also allows you to say, we're going to pivot at this point and go back to some of the work that we did during the evaluation stage, and we're going to try it this way instead, or we're going to try this solution instead, and start that process again as far as alignment and rolling it out and making sure that it's really the best solution at the end of the day for your clients.
Yeah, I got a question for you there. I was wondering, regarding the timing that we talked about earlier too, we use something called MVPs all the time, in software. Is that something that you think ultimately benefits you to get kind of that earlier feedback and to roll out something that maybe isn't the completed picture? But anyway, maybe you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think POC, proof of concept type projects or MVPs are awesome about it. It's a great way to gather feedback as early in the process as possible, which is from, speaking as a commercial software developer, that's invaluable. That's the cheapest place to get information. The further up in the chain of events you can get feedback and, sort of guide your results, the better, generally speaking. And I think it's the same way with even with initiatives that you're rolling out internally, at least in my experiences. Early feedback is awesome because you can make it's easier to make adjustments earlier in the cycle than it is late in the cycle, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think based on that feedback, it kind of rolls perfectly into what we'll talk about next, which is providing ongoing support. And anyway, go ahead and touch on.
Yeah, for sure. So, and this is something that during your build and buy decision cycle that you've probably done as a part of your evaluation is figuring out, all right, if this is a build scenario, are we providing frontline technical support for it? How are we going to handle, maintenance and defects and bugs, and, basically providing that ongoing support and potentially training where we have, lots of people, you've got more people potentially coming in during busy season that may need to be trained. So you may have an annual training cycle on particular tools. So there may be, all kinds of things that you need to take care of there. Or are we going to leverage, if you've made the decision to buy, are we going to leverage, how much are we going to leverage the support capabilities that are available, at vendor A or vendor B in order to get that done? And what in general are you going to have available for not only training your users, your internal users, but your clients. And the kind of experience that they're going to have over time is going to largely be driven by the support that they receive, the support and training they receive on, whichever tool you've decided to build or buy.
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes in line with the number 4 step that we were talking about, where evaluating potential solution providers. If you do end up going to buy a route, I think it's not to be understated, right? Having the appropriate support. How can your clients and your team members get quick access to that support as well? But something I want to ask you is, how much time do you spend on ongoing support internally? I think it's one of those areas that people often underestimate in terms of what they think they're going to spend in that area versus what the actual, the experience is.
Yeah. So this kind of plays back into the whole build scenario, right? So to understand sort of from a costing standpoint, what you're going to spend, sort of long term on a project, not just for the initial implementation, but for the successful life cycle of the product itself. You can look at commercial software as a service vendors as sort of a guide for that. So, for example, Sherling spends up to 20 to 40% of all of our engineering time is built around providing maintenance and ongoing updates to the system, or answering questions that get escalated from our very capable customer support teams. So, if you're spending 40% of your time on ongoing maintenance, 60% of your time can be used for either further roadmap development or additional development. But there is an ongoing investment there as you roll these solutions in general out, that should not be discounted when you're sort of evaluating cost.
Yeah, I think that's good for people to know, because it's one of those where sometimes I think we tend to think we'll spend more or less time on certain areas, and I think it's nice to get that breakout of what it's actually like day in, day out. And this last one, I think, kind of encapsulates the other ones as well, or at least in terms of an area where you can get feedback, which is joining a peer network.
Yeah, and just to your last point, that sort of set and forget model can work in certain scenarios, but often it's a fallacy, and at the end of the day, it's going to end up costing you. You need to understand the investment that you're getting into when for any solution, whether it's something that you built or whether it's something that you bought. It's generally not going to be a set and forget type thing. You're going to have ongoing costs and need for supporting that, which kind of exactly what you mentioned is it kind of leads into this last step. And this really isn't part of the process, but is sort of an underlying component to just good technology strategy management in general, is that it's understanding the industries the industry that you're in, the options that are available to you, and some of the best practices or experiences people are having, implementing various and sundry solutions. And you can really do that inside of the peer networks. That's why we do, webinars like this, so that we can be involved in those conversations ourselves, because we want to be, an active contributor in that environment. So whether you're learning from somebody, or whether you're contributing to that conversation with your own experience, absolutely invaluable as far as like that continuous cycle of making and implementing good decisions for our clients.
Yeah, for sure. And I think firms become more confident through that process too, right? Whether it's going through the Boomer Consulting or other alliances, just kind of getting that peer-to-peer knowledge if they're building or if they're looking to buy. I think that always just helps teams become more confident, knowing, hey, is this firm of 2 or 3 steps ahead, and what's their process like? Or again, I think it's a great resource.
For sure, you can get a sneak peek at, like, as a growing company, you can get a sneak peek at potentially some of the business problems or issues or client issues that you're going to see moving forward, so that you can start thinking about and answering some of those questions, those crucial questions that we talked about earlier.
For sure. Do you want to lead us into the next piece, which is ultimately choosing the right direction and approach for your firm?
Absolutely. So, we've talked about some of the crucial or key conversations that are going to help drive some of the decision making when it comes to build versus buy. So once you've identified, sort of the big why you're doing the thing that what it is that you're trying to do and why it is you're doing it, having those crucial conversations, and then leveraging some sort of a framework in order to, guide those conversations and guide that research to a decision point. Ultimately you need to, that technology committee needs to make a call, and as far as like making a decision as far as rollout goes. And I think that in my experience, there are certain things, like I said, the 80-20 rule sort of applies here again, is you want to be involved and you want to potentially have a higher hand in the higher value things, or the unique things about that you're providing as a part of your company that are part of your special sauce. In a lot of cases, it just makes more sense to use an external vendor. So, I'm a software guy. I've been writing software my whole life, but I don't write my email system. I use a vendor for that. There are going to be things that you need to be expert at as a company. And I think that should play into your decision as well. Leverage vendors where you can get vendors, add value, and invest your internal capacity where you really need to, where you can provide that unique value that your firm or your company is providing.
For sure. Yeah. I was just going to say, for me, I guess it ultimately comes down to, do you really want to be a software company, or do you want to focus kind of what your bread and butter is, which is, providing your clients with the best accounting firm experience. So again, I think this kind of provides a great overall framework of how to approach those, no matter which way you go, but something to keep in mind, right? And do you want to kind of take us through maybe the key takeaways here from what we've covered so far?
Absolutely. Just to kind of wrap it up, from like what we've covered today is, I think it's super important, at least in my experience, is to stay focused on what matters most. And what matters most is whatever's the most important things from a priority standpoint for your organization or firm, and then applying technology to that in a way that makes sense. So stay focused on, the things that matter the most, and potentially leverage vendors to help get you there on the critical systems, and provide the right value where you need to. The second thing that we've talked about is that I think having an understanding of these sort of crucial questions and crucial areas is going to help you drive the right kind of conversations internally, in order to have you make the best decisions. That, again, whether it's whether you ultimately end up choosing a build, or whether you ultimately end up choosing a buy option, having those conversations is going to help you leverage that, or make the best decision possible. And I think that the last thing is that you should follow a process to help you get to that, to drive to those points. Whether it's even a light process at a small company is better than no process. So, go through and create that process for yourself to get the collaboration that you need in order to successfully roll out the solutions that you're ultimately going to provide. Having that cross-functional collaboration and sort of moving through that process together towards decision and rollout is ultimately going to pay a lot of dividends for you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great summary of what we've been going through here today, and a good approach to that. And with that said, just kind of as a reminder to everybody, if you do want to put in some questions, we'll jump into the Q&A next. Feel free to do so. We'll cover those here. So whether it's for Jeremy or me, either way, just put those in the comment section and we can address them. Now, something that has come up, or one of the questions, can you talk a little bit more about integration? So usually when we talk about building, we think about building from scratch, right? But there are also custom integrations that you can build, which kind of to me seem like a middle ground, and it still requires resources, but not quite the same amount as building something completely from the ground up. So maybe you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost a build, buy, or integrate when you come right down to it, right? So you've got where integrate is a little bit of both at the end of the day, where you're taking the raw materials of a third party vendor or third party solution, or a commercial solution, and integrating that with the systems and processes that you already have available. Again, I think this can be a really powerful option in order to help you customize the experience that your internal users are having, that your external users that your customer users are having, in order to remove as much of the friction as possible in any engagement scenario, and help them facilitate really good experiences from a tooling standpoint. Sometimes that means putting together point solutions, but it also means that you, from a talent standpoint, though, there's going back to expertise, you need to have the right sort of inbuilt talent in order to leverage that. Folks that are familiar with APIs and webhooks and all of the various ways that you can interact with a lot of these SaaS solutions that are out there today will be key to helping you make really powerful integrations between a variety of software solutions.
To follow up on that question, is there how would you differentiate or look at maybe solution providers that have open APIs versus kind of have the direct integration? What do you kind of see between the two there?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in being able to leverage an API when I buy a solution. When I buy a solution, I want to be able to integrate it into the various workflows that I have in my own organization. So I think that the ability, like I said, and there's a lot of ways to do it. It could be APIs, it could be webhooks, it could be a variety, it could be plugins. There's a variety of different ways that people have available to them to allow integrations into your workflow and your processes. But that all comes during that evaluation stage. Like, what do I need, right? Maybe I don't need that in this area of research or of problem, business problems that I'm trying to solve. But often I like to have them, make sure that I have them available during buy decisions, so that even if I'm not leveraging them now, I can leverage them later.
Awesome. So it looks like a second question here is also a good one. How do you pivot if you're in this situation where you're either already building or have started buying one or more solutions? So I guess this speaks more to, hey, maybe I'm in the middle of one of these. How do I shift gears if I need to?
Yeah, that's a tricky conversation to have, for sure, right? I would love to hear from others out there who may have had to walk this road as well. But that's why I'm a big believer in iteration in general. Is you can start with a smaller investment. Hopefully you can vet those issues and find those issues early, so that you can make a different decision, if needed earlier. So I think iteration in general allows you to hopefully set the expectations of all of those involved, whether it's a technology committee or the business in general, that, hey, this is the direction that we're going. We feel strongly about this. We're going to give this a try. But we're also ready if we need to make a different decision, moving, once you've actually started to deploy or started to roll out, and the solution isn't performing the way that you had hoped. But helping you drive those conversations with real data, I think has really been my most successful way. So gather the data that you need in order to have the conversation that you need to have, so that you can make the decision you need to make.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add there is, I think like we were talking about earlier, I think the committees help you kind of avoid that sunk cost fallacy. I know sometimes, internally we had a few months back a solution we were going to implement. We were, excited about it, but 6 months in, we kind of realized, hey, it wasn't exactly quite what we were looking for. And I think it was because it was a collaborative, team effort. We were able to say, hey, let's just cut it here, cut our losses, and then, look at something else. So, no, I think that's a great way to look at it. Really good approach. And hopefully this gives everybody an idea of how you can tackle this moving forward. Unless there are any other questions, I want to be respectful of your time and thank everybody for joining us today. Hopefully give you, seven more minutes to eat or do whatever you need to do. So Jeremy, any final thoughts?
No, it was a great conversation. Thanks for letting me jump in and be a part of it. As always with our organization, we're super happy and trying to be engaged and gather feedback and work with our clients to have these types of conversations, so that we can keep evolving and moving forward. So feel free to reach out to any of us at any time, and we're grateful to be a part of that conversation.
Perfect. Well, you'll get a recording of this. And if you have any questions, like Jeremy said, feel free to reach out to us. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.